No one expected the hearing to take a turn. It was supposed to be procedural, just a quick session in federal court to finalize what Judge Edward Chen described as a closed matter. Pam Bondi sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, her expression unreadable. She had said little all morning, even as Chen leaned forward and declared, in the interest of institutional integrity, this case will be sealed permanently. The courtroom murmured with confusion. The attorneys behind her exchanged puzzled glances. Even the stenographer paused for a second, her fingers hovering uncertainly above the keys. Pam didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly stood up. "Your Honor," she said clearly, "before you proceed with that order, I'd like to submit something for the record." Judge Chen looked irritated. "Ms. Bondi, the time for new evidence has long passed." "The motion to seal," she cut him off, respectfully but firmly. "It's not new evidence, Your Honor. It's something overlooked." And from her handbag, she pulled out a small, unmarked flash drive and handed it to the bailiff. A chill passed through the room. Judge Chen narrowed his eyes. "What is this, Ms. Bondi?" Pam met his gaze directly. "A conversation recorded 3 weeks ago, in a parking garage. Between two individuals who didn't know they were being overheard." The courtroom held its breath. Judge Chen blinked. Pam added, "One of those individuals is seated on the bench today." Judge Chen hesitated. His usual commanding presence wavered as he stared at the flash drive now resting beside the clerk. "You're out of order, Ms. Bondi," he said, voice tight. "This court does not entertain last-minute theatrics." "I'm not asking the court to entertain anything," Pam replied coolly. "I'm asking it to hear the truth." There was a long pause. Then the judge finally nodded to the bailiff. "Load it. But mark it as unofficial for now." The bailiff inserted the flash drive into the courtroom monitor system. A static pop filled the room, and then a scratchy recording began. "I told you, it's taken care of. She won't get close to it. We bury this case, seal the whole thing. You sure she doesn't know?" "She suspects. But it's too late." Chen already agreed. Gasps rippled through the room. Several people leaned forward in their seats. Judge Chen's face flushed. The voice in the recording was unmistakably his. He slammed his gavel down, hard. "That's enough. Stop the playback." But the damage was done. Pam stayed standing. Her voice was steady. "This court has a right to transparency. And that recording shows clear intent to obstruct." The courtroom was no longer quiet. Whispers turned into loud murmurs. One reporter bolted for the hallway. Chen gripped the edge of his bench. "You obtained that recording illegally." Pam didn't flinch. "It was passed to me by someone who was tired of being part of a cover-up." She stepped closer. "And he's here. In the building. Ready to testify." The courtroom doors creaked open. Heads turned. A tall man in a navy suit stepped inside, flanked by 2 security officers. His expression was firm, almost defiant. Under his arm, he held a folder thick with printed documents. Judge Chen's eyes widened. "Mr. Langford." The man gave a single nod. "Yes, Your Honor." Pam turned toward the court. "This is Daniel Langford, former clerk of Judge Chen's chambers. He submitted a sworn affidavit to my office this morning." Chen's gavel hovered midair. Langford took the stand voluntarily. The judge reluctantly signaled for the oath to be administered. Reporters scribbled furiously. A few spectators stood in the back, phones tucked discreetly in their palms, recording everything. Under oath, Langford's voice was calm but carried weight. "I was instructed to scrub portions of internal memos and communications relating to the Ferguson case, emails that tied court officials to the suppression of evidence." Pam leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "Did Judge Chen directly give you these instructions?" Langford looked straight at the bench. "Yes. On 2 separate occasions. He said sealing the case was essential to preserving order. A collective gasp swept the room. Pam took a step forward. And do you have documentation of this? Langford lifted the folder. Right here. Email trails. Internal messages. Time-stamped entries. Judge Chen's hands were trembling now. This is highly irregular. This entire proceeding is becoming a circus. Pam cut him off again, her voice sharper this time. No, Your Honor. What's irregular is a federal judge manipulating the court to hide misconduct. The room fell dead silent. The clerk, now visibly shaken, took the folder from Langford and handed it to the bailiff, who placed it on the bench. Judge Chen stared down at it as if it were a ticking bomb. Pam Bondi didn't sit. She didn't blink. She stood in place, letting the weight of Langford's testimony settle like dust in a forgotten room. You're making serious allegations, Chen said slowly, eyes still on the unopened folder. Ones that, if false, could amount to defamation and obstruction. Pam's voice was unwavering. Then open it. The room was still. Even the gallery didn't breathe. With a reluctant hand, Judge Chen unfastened the folder. The first page was Langford's affidavit, notarized, dated that morning, and bearing the federal seal. He flipped the next page. Email headers. The next, a printed message from Chen himself, ensure no mention of the third witness transcript remains. If Bondi catches it, we'll have a bigger mess than last time. His hands stopped flipping. For a moment, all he did was stare. Pam finally spoke again, her tone almost quiet. You tried to bury this case because it leads back to people in high places. But your mistake was assuming no one inside your walls had a conscience. The judge looked up at her. His face was pale now. He glanced over at the bailiff, then at the federal marshal posted in the corner of the courtroom. Your Honor, Pam continued, I'm formally moving to unseal this case, submit the audio and written documentation into evidence, and request immediate judicial review for misconduct. Langford spoke again, steady as ever. And I'm prepared to testify before the Ethics Committee. Today. Judge Chen didn't reach for his gavel. Instead, he whispered, almost to himself, clear the room. The judge's voice was barely audible, but the order echoed like thunder. Clear the room. Gasps broke out as the bailiff and 2 marshals moved swiftly through the gallery. Reporters protested, one of them shouting, "This is a public hearing." But Chen didn't respond. Pam remained still. She watched the chaos without moving a muscle. Her eyes stayed locked on the judge. Within 2 minutes, only essential court personnel, security, Pam, Langford, and the judge were left. Judge Chen rubbed his temples, then slowly stood. He didn't look at Pam. You think you've trapped me? Pam didn't reply. He continued, quieter now, voice laced with something between regret and resentment. You don't know what's been going on behind the scenes. The pressure. The threats. The people I've been forced to protect. Langford stood as well. Then say it under oath. Chen finally looked up, and this time, directly at Pam. You really want to know the truth, Ms. Bondi, he said, a bitter smile tugging at one side of his mouth. This case was never supposed to see daylight. It connects agencies that don't show up on official budgets. People with access to levers I didn't even know existed when I was sworn in. Pam stepped closer, her tone sharpened. Then maybe it's time those people faced the light. Chen exhaled heavily, glancing at the marshal. I want counsel, he muttered. I won't say another word without legal representation. Pam nodded. You'll get your counsel. But this case won't be sealed. Not now. Not ever. The federal marshal approached the bench. Sir, he said, I have orders from the Inspector General's office to detain you for questioning. Effective immediately. The courtroom went utterly still. Judge Edward Chen didn't protest. He just lowered his head, and extended both hands. The sound of metal cuffs clicking shut echoed through the courtroom, louder than any gavel ever could. Judge Edward Chen, once a towering figure of authority in the federal judiciary, was now standing handcuffed, flanked by two marshals. His black robe hung loosely, shoulders slumped beneath it. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. Pam Bondi remained composed. She said nothing as Chen was escorted past her, though their eyes met briefly. There was no malice in her expression, only finality. Langford watched in silence, shoulders straight, jaw tight. Once the judge was taken through the side exit, a clerk looked around nervously. Should we recess? Pam turned to face her. No. There's still a record to correct. The court reporter resumed typing, and Pam approached the bench. With Judge Chen removed, a substitute judge, a quiet, gray-haired federal magistrate, entered from chambers. He quickly reviewed the affidavit and the motion Bondi had filed earlier in the morning. It didn't take long. This court hereby orders the case unsealed, the new judge declared. All submitted materials, including the audio recording, email documentation, and Mr. Langford's sworn testimony, are to be entered into the public record. A pause. And we will be forwarding the complete file to the Office of Judicial Oversight. A wave of emotion passed across the courtroom staff. The energy shifted from tension to something else, something rare in that building. Relief. Pam looked at Langford. You ready for the media? She asked. He gave a small, tired smile. More than I was ready for the silence. They turned and walked out of the courtroom together, into a hallway that now buzzed with cameras, flashing lights, and voices shouting her name. Pam didn't stop. She was already thinking about the next case. As Pam Bondi and Daniel Langford exited the courtroom, they were instantly engulfed by a wall of reporters. Microphones thrust forward. Cameras clicked. Questions flew like darts. Ms. Bondi, did you expect Judge Chen to be arrested today? Is this part of a larger cover-up? Mr. Langford, are you concerned for your safety? Pam held up a hand, signaling calm. We'll take one question at a time, she said firmly. And we'll be transparent, which is exactly what this courtroom failed to be, until now. A younger reporter in the front raised his mic. What was on that recording, exactly? How did you get it? Pam met his gaze. The recording was handed to me anonymously, by someone who witnessed decisions being made in secret. Decisions that went beyond judicial discretion. What you heard today wasn't just misconduct, it was a betrayal of public trust. Another voice called out, do you believe other judges were involved? She paused. I believe this was not the act of one man. And if there are others protecting that kind of behavior, they should prepare for the same spotlight. Langford stepped up. I didn't come forward to destroy anyone's career, he said. But I couldn't keep quiet and watch the law be twisted into a shield for people in power. The cameras flashed again. Behind them, a few legal interns watching from a distance clapped, quickly silenced by their supervisors. Pam concluded, we're not here for revenge. We're here for accountability. The system only works when the people inside it choose courage over comfort. As they turned to leave, a reporter shouted, what's next, Ms. Bondi? She glanced back. I suggest everyone start checking their inboxes. Because this was just the first file. While the media frenzy unfolded outside, another story was quietly brewing inside the federal building. In a sealed office 3 floors up, 2 senior officials from the Office of Judicial Oversight reviewed the evidence Pam Bondi had submitted. The audio file. The printed emails. Langford's notarized affidavit. One of them, a weathered man in a gray suit named Holloway, tapped his pen against the table. She went right through him, he muttered, almost with admiration. Didn't blink. His colleague, a younger woman named Reyes, was already drafting the preliminary ethics violations notice. This opens more than just Chen, she said. The emails reference off-the-record calls with other circuits. Coordinated efforts to suppress discovery. If even half of this holds up, it will, Holloway interrupted. Bondi doesn't bluff. He leaned back, eyeing the growing pile of documents. Pull the last 2 years of sealed case activity from Chen's docket, he instructed. Cross-reference anyone he coordinated with. And flag any case where Pam Bondi was ever denied discovery. I want a list on my desk by morning. Reyes looked up. You think this could spread? Holloway nodded. No one plans a cover-up this careful unless they're protecting something bigger. He paused, tapping the folder again. She just kicked the first brick out of the wall. Meanwhile, in a quiet corridor outside the courthouse, Pam and Langford stepped into a black SUV. The driver pulled away discreetly, not a government vehicle, but one contracted through a private network used for high-risk legal movements. Langford broke the silence. They're going to come after us. Pam didn't deny it. They already tried, she said, pulling out a second flash drive from her coat pocket. This was just the first half. Langford stared at it. What's on that one? Pam looked out the window, her expression like stone. The names. The SUV moved through the city streets, its windows tinted, its route unlisted. Inside, silence weighed heavier than any conversation. Langford's eyes stayed on the second flash drive in Pam's hand, smaller than a car key, but loaded with consequence. You're sure it's clean? He asked. Pam nodded. Triple swept. Air-gapped machine. No traceable metadata. She plugged it into a secure tablet and opened a single encrypted file. A spreadsheet blinked onto the screen. Column A, Case IDs. Column B, Internal routing notes. Column C, Names of involved judicial staff, marked with digital fingerprints. But Column D was where Langford's breath caught. Column D, Discretionary contact, external entity, and beneath that, Office of Special Counsel, unofficial, redacted agency addresses, 3 personal Gmail accounts tied to names he recognized but hoped never to see connected to a federal courtroom. Langford leaned in. That's a senior advisor from DOJ. 2 appellate judges. And is that? Yes, Pam cut in. A retired intelligence liaison. Still active under contract. Langford looked stunned. This wasn't just about shielding a bad ruling. They were laundering influence. Pam tapped the screen to highlight one row. This is the one that matters, she said. Because this name, right here, sat on a committee that blocked whistleblower protections for judicial staff. Langford's eyes narrowed. You're going public with this? Pam shook her head. Not yet. If I release it now, they'll bury it. Discredit you. Reassign the cases. He asked the question that had been building in his throat all day. Then what are we doing? Pam glanced out the window. The car was pulling up to a small, nondescript federal annex. We're not going public, she said. We're going above them. The black SUV rolled to a stop beside a quiet building with no signs, no flags, and no cameras in sight. A single security camera tracked them, but only subtly, like it was used to this kind of arrival. Langford looked out the window. Where are we? Pam tucked the flash drive back into her coat. This is where the chain of command runs out. They stepped out into the evening air. A man in a tailored suit waited by the door. He nodded at Pam without introduction and opened it for them. Inside, the hallways were sterile and dim, lit by recessed lighting and lined with old portraits of unnamed officials. They passed no one. Not a single soul. Langford whispered, "Are you sure we can trust?" "No," Pam interrupted. "But we can't let this die in committee hearings and sealed transcripts." At the end of the hallway, they entered a conference room. 3 individuals sat at a long mahogany table, one from the Department of Homeland Security, one from the Intelligence Community Inspector General's office, and one whose badge was flipped upside down. The woman in the middle spoke first. Ms. Bondi. Mr. Langford. We've been expecting you. Pam opened the file. I'm here to deliver formal notice under Federal Protective Protocol 49B. This evidence cannot be buried, rerouted, or erased. Chain of custody begins now. She placed the drive on the table. This contains active judicial corruption, unauthorized communication with external intelligence contractors, and classified-level coordination to suppress whistleblower testimony. The man with the flipped badge leaned forward. And what do you want in return? Pam didn't hesitate. I want full protective status for Langford. And I want a grand jury, not a task force, not an inquiry. A federal grand jury. One that sees everything. Silence fell. Then the woman nodded once. You'll have it. Langford exhaled for the first time in hours. Pam turned to him. This is where it gets dangerous, she said quietly. Because now, they know we're not bluffing. By the time Pam and Langford left the annex building, night had fallen. The city buzzed as usual, unaware that in a windowless room beneath their feet, a grand jury had just been greenlit to investigate sitting federal judges. Langford looked at her as they stepped into a different vehicle, this one driven by a U.S. Marshal. Are you ready for the blowback? Pam glanced at her phone, where messages had already begun to pour in, encrypted channels lighting up with both support and subtle warnings. I wasn't ready the first time I faced them, she said. But now? They should be the ones getting nervous. The marshal pulled away from the curb and merged into traffic. Inside the annex, the three officials remained at the table. The woman who'd authorized the grand jury reviewed the digital file once more, zooming in on a hidden log, one Pam hadn't mentioned. A separate audio recording. One not played in court. She clicked it. If Bondi brings this forward, we don't just lose jurisdiction. We lose the shield. So what do? We make sure she never gets to that annex. The room went cold. The official leaned back and tapped the table twice. Get her a security detail. Discreet, but permanent. A younger aide hesitated. But she hasn't requested, she won't, the woman said. But after what she just lit up, that storm is already on its way. Back in the vehicle, Langford asked one final question. What happens if they come after us anyway? Pam turned to him, calm and resolute. Then we don't run. We do what they hate most. She looked ahead as the city lights blurred past the glass. We stay in the light. 2 days later, the headlines broke. Federal grand jury convened to investigate judicial misconduct. Whistleblower evidence triggers multi-agency probe. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, but none could keep up with the speed of the leak. Transcripts, audio recordings, email chains, all authenticated, all verified, were released in stages. Each drop more damning than the last. And Pam Bondi didn't hide. She held a press conference on the courthouse steps, with Langford standing beside her. I didn't come here to make enemies, she said. I came to defend the law from being twisted into a tool for the few. If we let that happen in silence, then justice becomes just another word in a broken system. When asked if she feared retaliation, her answer was simple, I fear silence more. The DOJ issued a statement confirming that multiple judges were under review. Judicial oversight expanded the investigation to include communications from 3 separate circuits. And within 72 hours, Judge Edward Chen submitted a formal resignation, delivered through counsel, citing health concerns. But the public knew better. Meanwhile, Daniel Langford began work with an independent legal watchdog organization, helping others inside the system come forward. Quietly. Safely. The final piece came weeks later, in a letter addressed to Pam, typed on plain paper with no return address. It read, You cracked it open. We've waited a long time for someone to do what you did. You're not alone anymore. Stay sharp. More to come. A friend behind the glass. Pam folded the letter and tucked it away without a word. She knew what it meant. The wall hadn't just cracked. It had started to crumble. And as long as the light stayed on it, it wouldn't be rebuilt.